Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and I have delivered as promised. Today, we're talking about a new archetype because there's only, unfortunately, one new archetype in Rage of Elements. I know it's sad, but I will be doing more content on Rage of Elements and one of the other archetypes in the book as well got some changes to a previous archetype. So we'll be looking at a little bit of that. But today is also a unique video because I don't normally do this, but I do understand a lot of you out there are very excited for the Kineticist. So today we're going to be talking about the multi-class dedication for the Kineticist. Now, just a little bit before that, I don't normally do the multi-class because I think they're just very obvious choices. People are going to look into them, and there's a variety of things. I think I will do the multi-class archetypes at some point in the near future, especially if I get done with the bite-sized series. But the only reason why I haven't already done them up until this point is I feel like the other archetypes in the game are just more obscure, and you might not realize the real power that lies in some of the archetypes in the game. But considering Rage of Elements really didn't have any new archetypes, I figured why not do Kineticist multiclass because a lot of people are going to be interested in it anyway. And it is genuinely very interesting. So let's go ahead and take a look at the dedication itself. So in order to become a Kineticist multiclass anyway, you need a +2 Constitution modifier score. Now, you all might be noticing, wait, it doesn't say 14 con because the Rage of Moments book is going to be the first in the line of remasters that change and adjust some of the terminology in the book. So now it's just if you have a Constitution modifier of +2, which is genuinely really easy, and I think Kineticist is going to be a very easy class to multi-class into because you're going to invest a little bit into your Constitution anyway. Most characters will, as it helps you not die, and having at least some health and a bonus to your fortitude saving throws is just good overall. So most classes, especially marshals, I think will be able to get into Kineticist without any major investment beyond what they were already going to do. Now, becoming a Kineticist, you become trained in the Kineticist class DC and impulse attack rolls. This is a misnomer. This is not, or not misnomer, but this is not the actual terminology. Impulse attack rolls are not a new type of attack modifier or weapon modifier. Kineticist class features, including anything that would be an attack roll, which is called impulse attacks, are all based on the Kineticist's class DC. So class DC is everything for Kineticist. And so when you get a later feat that increases it, it also increases the bonuses you get to your impulse attacks, which it does specify. When you become a Kineticist, you choose one element to be your kinetic elements. Either air, earth, fire, metal, wood, water, or wood. Granted, I think if they add other ones, they will add more, but I don't think they actually will add any others to the game at any point in the future. I think they'll just continue to add impulses to these. Now, you also gain a kinetic aura, and a kinetic aura doesn't really do anything unless you have a feature that tells you the aura does something. So don't worry about that too much. And you gain the channel elements action. Channel elements action is what you need in order to use any impulse actions, including the blast action. Now, it does state that unlike a normal kineticist, you don't get to use an elemental blast or stance impulse when you take this action. So if you're going to blast, you need to first essentially kind of stance up, though this can be combined with stances. So you need to use channel elements to gather your elements, activating your aura. And now from this point forward, you can use elemental blasts as much as you want until you use an action that has the overflow trait, or you get knocked unconscious, in which your aura deactivates. So as long as you don't use any actions at the overflow is just a type of impulse that will cause your aura to deplete after using it. So you need to channel elements again. So you don't have to worry about it unless you take a feat like that. And if you are knocked unconscious, of course, you'll need to use this when you get back up. But other than that, it's pretty good. Now, your Elemental Blast does not automatically gain additional damage dice every 4 levels, instead requiring you to get the improved Blast feat, which I'll mention here later. And I will actually go into what Elemental Blast is and does later. I want to do it later before, so I can kind of just do everything at once, right? So I'll talk about the Blast and what they can benefit to you in a little bit, but let's look at the next feats. So next up, you gain the Base Kinesis Impulse, which is an impulse that as long as you have your aura up, you can manipulate elements in your environment. And let's go ahead and take a look at it here. Okay, so Base Kinesis is a 2-action impulse, and you get 3 things that essentially you can do with it. You can generate an element, which allows you to create an element from nothing. The element can be used for its normal uses. For example, air can be breathed by an air-breathing creature, and fire casts light and can ignite flammable sources, but otherwise it can't be used to attack, and it doesn't do really much of anything. Now, your level dictates the range at which you can manipulate things and the amount of bulk that you can do so. You can see here at the bottom, but it's different if you are multi-classing, which I'll mention that in a little bit, but let's look at the other things it can do. You can move an elemental piece up to 20 feet in any direction. If you bring it into your space, you can catch it with an open hand. You can sustain the impulse to keep moving the element. So if you're going to move it the next round, you only need to use 1 action to keep it going rather than using Base Kinesis again, which is pretty cool. And then suppress. You can destroy an element, but there's some caveats. The element itself only affects natural forms of the element, so not magic or anything like that. It's not durable, so you can't destroy something like an iron object or really like any kind of metal thing necessarily, unless like it's a natural geode, I guess. But those would technically be durable. I don't know. It's very weird. I'm assuming it means like anything that has a hardness value. So I don't know. Any crafted good. So if anyone's touched it or etched into it at all, you can't do anything to it. Like a stone statue, metal lock, or a wooden door. So this is a lot of fluff and a lot of flair. And not only that, but you can only do so much with the multi-class variant of this, because your kinesis level is essentially half of your current level. So for instance, every time you need to go up 8 levels, or you need to be every 8 levels rather than every 4 levels to go up an additional bulk and have additional distance. I think it's 20 feet of movement, or 20 feet or 30 feet. It's somewhere in that range of range you get to the ability. So you can't do it super far, but other than that, the general effect besides the bulk is the same. Now, Base Kinesis is meh. I don't like Base Kinesis for Kineticist that much. It's just super vague, and it's used in very niche situations, and it's not very mechanical. So sometimes resolving how it works might just cause headaches. And the Base Kinesis from the multiclass is that, but you're more restricted in a sense. So I don't know really many practical uses, but if you're a very ingenuitive or creative person, you can utilize this. And heck, if you have fire, you get to do the cool thing where you snap your finger and you can treat your thumb like a lighter. So, I guess that's kind of cool. But otherwise, Base Kinesis is kind of just meh. All right, the next 2 feats I'm going to skip, which is Through the Gate and Advanced Elemental Control. They're the ones that give you Kineticist feats, because I want to do the feats after everything else, because I think all the other feats will give context to what these are, and it's very varied as to what is actually beneficial to you. So next up, we're going to talk about Improved Elemental Blast. And now let's look at Kinetic Blast while we're here. So Kinetic Blasts, you get one and you get access to it as a multi-class, which is pretty good. It's essentially the same as the Kineticists. So Elemental Blast is 1 or 2 actions, and you pick an element. The element dictates what type of damage it does, and you can choose every time you use the blast. For instance, if it's a air, it can do electricity or slashing damage. If it does a D6, it has a range of 60 feet. If it does a D8, it has a range of 30 feet. You can also use Elemental Blasts as a martial attack, but it is a kinetic martial, or it is a kinetic melee strike. So you still use the elemental blast impulse action, which requires you to use your Kineticist DC. So this isn't just a way for martial characters to get an elemental unarmed strike, as you still use Kineticist DC, and that is kind of a problem because this doesn't translate super well to martial characters. Melee wise, unless you need a specific element for a certain situation, which might come up, it's just not going to be helpful. Now, when you do use Elemental Blast in melee combat, you add your Strength modifier, and if you do the 2-action version, you add your Constitution modifier on top of it. And if you're using ranged, if you do the 2-action, you still add your Con modifier onto it. So, Elemental Blast is a okay option for ranged. If you really have nothing else, the biggest benefits to Elemental Blast, I feel, are it does elemental damage, which might be useful against some enemy weaknesses. Other than that, honestly, using a bow is probably just going to be better overall. And that's kind of sad. But obviously, you can't be as good as blasting as a kineticist can be. So it's for the sake of balancing purposes, but blasts are not great. And then another feature that doesn't make them great is improved elemental blast. What this does is at level 8, 14, and 18, you can add essentially an additional die of the same die type as your blast to the damage, which means at most you get 4d whatever, d6 or d8 of your elemental blasts. That's okay, but you could also have 4d whatever of a ranged weapon, right? And so, or a martial weapon if you really want to do elemental or like blasts in person. So that's already a problem. Secondly, because impulses are a new type of attack that rely on class DC, there is no weapon runes or anything you can apply to blast, nor like hand wraps and mighty blows or anything, as they're not considered unarmed. But you can use an item called the Gate Attenuator. And the Gate Attenuator is essentially the Kineticist specific item. Now, it does have some weird wording. It says if you are a Kineticist, the Attenuator grants you a +1 item bonus to your impulse attacks, but not your impulse DCs. Now, my assumption is more of if you're capable of using impulse attacks, you can use this. I don't think you need to actually be a kineticist specifically. There's not many instances in the entire game where you need to be a class specifically to use an item. If you make that argument, then blasts are completely useless to anyone besides a kineticist. And it in no way breaks the game to allow attenuators to affect non-kineticists. So the overall, my opinion is let anyone use it who has access to a blast or any kind of attack impulse. And not only that, but the attenuator does allow you to use different magic spells in addition to it based on the element it is attuned to. So it is very important that you do that. And attuning it is also a kind of a thing as well. But overall, right, so you can at the very least get an item bonus of +2, which is one less with the major gate attenuator. The level 17 item still gives you a impulse attack modifier of +2. I don't know if it's meant to be +3 because greater gate attenuator gives you also a +2 to your attacks, but if we assume it's intended as written, then +2 is the most you can get, which isn't a lot. At the very end of the game, it's a 1-point difference, which may make a difference, may not make a difference. I don't know. But the Gate Attenuator is an invested item. So, unlike weapon runes, there is that additional costs. And you can't apply any additional runes to your elemental blasts. So, what is the point of an elemental blast? This is actually something I've been honestly asking myself. It's a good way to have some elemental damage, fair. It can give you a ranged weapon that you need to use an action to utilize, which you could do for drawing a weapon as well. But you don't have to drop a weapon to do it. I don't know. I mean, it gives you a lesser item bonus. You can't apply property runes to it, and it doesn't even do more damage typically than a weapon would that could attack at any of the ranges that you could with an elemental blast. It's up to you whether you want to use elemental blasts. I don't think it's worth it, especially because to keep it relevant, you need to select multiple feats. At minimum, you need to select 3 feats to keep its damage competitive with other forms of damage that you could be using. Now, if you just get the base, you just get the base blast for the dedication, so you can just keep it on hand in case you come into an enemy that might be weak to it. But improved elemental blast, I just don't think is worth it overall. Add element is the next feat, and it allows you to select multiple elements, which you can even use this extra element to apply to hybrid benefits. Add element is actually good in the sense that it gives you access to more potential feats or impulses you can pick up, as well as the hybrid ones, which could be really good. So there's that. And the last feat is expert kinetic control. So expert kinetic control gives you expert in the class DC for being a kineticist. And honestly, I don't have a problem with this because this is pretty much the same for everything but spellcasters that can actually get to master. Like if you go into fighter, for instance, you get martial weapons up to expert, right? So this is not bad, and it applies to the DCs and the attacks. Your DC is not going to be great, but at least it scales on con. So if you're a martial class, it might be something you have a fair amount of con in. And your 2 hit is honestly not going to be that bad, but it will be 3 points under if you're using the attenuator, which gives it to impulse attacks. So something to keep in mind. But overall, that's that. Now I want to talk about Through the Gate, which gives you access to a level 1 or 2 feat, and Advanced Elemental Control, which gives you access to another feat with your Kineticist level equaling about half your level at the time of selecting the feat. But before we get into the feats that I think would work really well for multiclassing and overall make Kineticist worth it for being a multiclass archetype, I would like for y'all to subscribe. Simple, really easy. I'm pumping out this content just for you guys. It really helped me out. Plus, you get to see some of the other Rage of Elements content that I'm going to be producing. So if you want to see that, hit the like and maybe even the notification bell if you want to get those videos as soon as they can come up. But let's talk about some of my favorite feats from Kineticist. First, let's talk about Armor in Earth. Armor in Earth is really, really good because essentially you equipped a medium stone armor, but it doesn't matter what your armor proficiency is. It uses your highest armor proficiency. So, for instance, if you're a spellcaster, you still can essentially wear this medium armor while still using your unarmored armor proficiency, which is really good. This has an item bonus of +4, which is very good. It makes it generally with most medium armors, and a dex cap of +1. It has a check penalty of -2, a speed penalty of -10, and a strength penalty or a strength requirement of 16. So casters might not want to get this, but maybe late game, it gives you a really good armor because you also gain its armor specialization effect, which is for plate armor. So essentially, this is 2 feats in 1. You get armor specialization on top of the ability to wear this armor. Now, even if you make the strength requirement, it still has a speed penalty of -5, which makes this armor a lot slower for most medium armors. The benefit of this is any runes you're wearing on your armor that would apply to it, so your basic potency rune and resilient runes, do transfer, which is really good. And if for whatever reason, or if you're a martial character and you have medium armor on already, you can also transfer any medium armor type runes onto this one as well, which is pretty cool. Now, at 3rd level, which is really quick, actually, quicker than I think you can even pick this up, you can actually make this armor into heavy armor, still keeping the proficiency, still keeping critical specialization. Its AC bonus increases to 5, and it gains the bulwark armor trait, which gives you a +3 on reflex saving throws, but it replaces your dex bonus, which is really good if you don't have a high dex. And overall, this armor is just as good as heavy plate mail armor, as it still gives you overall a +6 because it keeps the +1 dex cap. That is really good, in addition to the fact that it still keeps your armor proficiency and benefits from any armor runes you're currently wearing. Now, obviously, maybe not everything will apply. Or maybe you have shadow armor, which wouldn't really work because shadow doesn't transfer onto anything higher than light armor. But overall, this is really, really good. And it's a singular action to don this armor. And that, my friends, is really, really good. As even if you're caught unawares in your bed at night, you can use a singular action to instantly, boom, pop on some armor. It won't have your runes on it, but it will at least give you something to defend yourself with, which is really big. Now, my next one is actually another armor variant, which is Metal Carapace. This one gives you a medium armor, has all the same kind of bells and whistles, except this one gives you an AC bonus of +3 and a dex cap of +2, and that never increases, though the speed penalty is only -5, so if you meet its strength requirement of 14, which is lower than stone, you actually can get rid of its check penalty and its speed penalty, which I think is important. But otherwise, you get the specialization. It's a plate armor, and besides being a slightly weaker armor, you get it. But in addition to the armor, you also generate a rusty shield that is essentially the same as a steel shield. And in addition, this steel shield, it counts as having a free hand for the uses of impulses that might require your hands. Not only that, but this shield gives you the shield block reaction with this shield specifically. And when you hit level 3 or higher, or sorry, at your level +3, every 3 levels, the shield's hardness increases by 1, and its HP by 4, and its break threshold by 2. This is really good, but the best part is you can keep donning this. It doesn't have overflow. So as long as you're shield blocking and your shield breaks, the second your shield breaks, well, not the second, but on your next turn, you can use Metal Carapace and you can create a shield again. And in addition to that, I will mention as well, if you suffer damage from a critical hit, the armor just breaks. So try not to get crit, but you're raising a shield, you're getting a shield benefit from this. And I really like this, and I like stone, and I like both these feats together because they can be used on most characters, especially because any runes that you're wearing can go onto. I'll read the effect. Any bonuses, runes, and magical abilities of your actual armor are suppressed, but any that could apply to the Metal Carapace are replicated onto it. So same for stone as well. This is really good in general, and this can be used on most characters, but let's look at some non-armor ones for those who might want something a little different. Ocean's Balm is a really good one. It allows you to, for a single action, give an ally a D8 HP, and every 2 levels of yours, and this isn't spell levels, right? These aren't spells. So every 2 of your levels, so every odd level, you get an additional D8, and this also gives fire resistance of 2 plus 1 for every 2 levels you have for 1 minute. Now, the ally becomes then immune to this effect for 10 minutes, but it's completely fine. It's essentially lay on hands, only not max HP for a D6, but potentially more HP for a D8. Overall, Ocean's Balm is really good, and honestly, any healing character could utilize Ocean's Balm as just an additional healing effect. And the best part is, it doesn't count. They're not focus points. Okay, Kineticist is broken because a lot of these really good effects are just not focus points, and they can just do it. It's really, really nutty. And it's something that I think is really powerful because essentially every 10 minutes when you're in downtime, you can now use something like Lay on Hands and Ocean's Balm in that 10-minute time frame. And both are in action technically. So even in one round. And last but not least, I want to mention Cyclonic Ascent. It is one that you'd have to use you'd have to be level 16 to pick this one up. But it's such a great impulse if you're planning on going into air, because when you pick it up, you automatically leveled up to the level 14 version because you can't pick it up until before then. This gives you infinite flight. It's 2 actions. You can fly for 10 minutes, but you can just keep flying. You can just keep using it. Like, it's 10 minutes, but if you use it again, you keep going for another 10 minutes. and you get a flight speed equal to your land speed or 30. A monk with this just gains a flight speed of whatever their monk speed is, which is really insane. And you can just do it forever. It's really good. Now, granted, flight at level 16 is nothing special in the game. I'll admit that. It's more insane that kineticists get infinite flight at level 8. I think that's absolutely nuts. But this allows classes that normally don't have access to flight feats gain access to flight, honestly, relatively easily. And with the 14th level version, you can do this to up to 5 additional creatures, giving your whole team essentially a fly speed equal to either their land speed or 30, whichever is higher. Cyclonic Ascent is really good, and for you anyway, you can fly up without treating it as difficult terrain, which is actually genuinely very powerful, and you do not need to keep moving or using a fly action to maintain flight. As long as you're using an air impulse of any kind, you can maintain flight without using the fly action, but you do need to use at least an air impulse. This is a long archetype video. There's a lot to talk about Kineticist, and I could go on and on about a variety of impulses that can be picked up by a character for multiclassing. Now, is Kineticist a good multiclass archetype? Yes. I think it's rather undeniable that the impulses and the things that they can create give you levels of utility that a lot of martial characters, like Fighter, for instance, just don't have in their kits. And honestly, you can do it for just a 3-feed pickup. All you need to do is Kineticist Dedication, Through the Gates, and Advanced Elemental Control when you hit a level for that higher level feat that you feel like you need to. The Blast and Improved Elemental Blast, I don't think are worth it. I feel like if you're a spellcaster, you already have access to cantrips that you're more likely to hit with anyway. So, yeah, that's also just one part of it. And if you're a martial character, a ranged weapon works just as well. Now, granted, yes, if an enemy has an elemental weakness, sure, these can come in handy if you run into that kind of situation. But if you don't, then it's just not useful most of the time. As long as you have a weapon that's properly kitted out, it's good. Now, I will state that if you're playing in a game that you just aren't getting gold is not something that you come across easily. So buying higher level weapon runes is difficult. I think Improved Elemental Blast can start kind of coming into the picture. You're still not more likely to hit because that means if you're not able to buy runes, you're not able to buy the Gate Attenuator. But the damage at least keeps scaling up. So in some situations, I will say Elemental Blast can work. But most of the time, it's a huge feat tax I feel like is completely unnecessary. I feel like they could have just leveled it up with you anyway, and it wouldn't have been a big deal. Or at the very least, at the level 8 version, you can do 2 dice rather than 1, like sneak attack, and that would be it, you know? I feel like it becomes a feat trap when they offer the 14 and 18th level version because that extra damage die, I don't think is worth an extra feat. I will also say, getting expert in the DC for the impulse, even though it uses your con, is still not going to make it very likely for you to do super well with some of the impulses. So I wouldn't get any impulses with the feat pickups that necessarily rely on a DC or an attack roll. Some of them can be good. Magnetic Pinion allows you to attack 3 times without on the same multi-attack penalty. So that one I think actually kind of neutrals out and it becomes more or less effective. But the other ones maybe not so much. You have to really pick and choose. But I do feel like most of the impulses that you might want to select are really good, especially because, again, most martial classes get access to a con modifier that is going to make it work. And for everything else, I mean, I think overall this will do the ticket, but you got to be smart with the Kineticist dedication. And that's going to be it for me. I hope this helped you out. Hopefully you guys got some insight for it, and let me know what your thoughts are down below. I'm very curious to see what some people might be thinking about doing with their Kineticist. That's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Lead the bad luck to me. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye.